the fresh start effect is like an actual real phenomenon, right? That is such a great way to trick your brain into like, I'm starting something new. Yesterday was yesterday. Today is the future. And that can be like January. It can be a Monday. It can be your birthday. But like, if you get one of those days that feels like it can be a fresh start, it's a great way to like start pursuing a goal that day.
Hello there, and welcome to today's episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. My name is Monica Burns, and I am so glad that you're here to join me today. If you want to make the most of education technology, aka EdTech, well, you are in the right place. My goal has always been to help make EdTech easier and give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. Every Tuesday here on the Easy EdTech Podcast, you'll hear stories from my time in the classroom, the work I do now with schools and districts, and my travels to different EdTech events. Get ready for solo episodes where I share some quick tips and stories, and interviews full of practical ideas and stories from new guests each month. If we mention something you'd like to check out, make sure to click the link. You'll find it in the episode description or the summary area where you're listening to this podcast, or you can find every episode and all of the resources we mention by going to classtechtips.com/podcast, or by going to classtechtips.com and just clicking on the Easy EdTech Podcast button at the top of the page. This episode is sponsored by my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction, published by ASCD and ISTE. It's full of quick tips educators can use, and Amazon almost always has it on sale. Just search for me, Monica Burns, on Amazon to see all of my books and quick reference guides. But please remember that there are 2 authors named Monica Burns on Amazon, and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to tell the difference between our books. Just head to Amazon, search Monica Burns, and you'll find my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction. This week's episode is titled Goal Setting with a Growth Mindset, and I'm joined by authors Annie Brock and Heather Hundley. They are educators and co-authors of The Growth Mindset Coach, 2nd edition. And in today's conversation, we explore how goal setting can support a growth mindset for both students and educators, and how EdTech tools like artificial intelligence, AI-powered tools, and even data dashboards can play a powerful role throughout this process. From classroom routines to really practical strategies, Heather and Annie share some thoughtful, honest ideas you can try out this school year. Let's jump into the conversation. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to chat with you both about goal setting with an EdTech connection. But before we get into all of that, would love to hear a bit about both of your roles in education, what your day-to-day looks like. Annie, if you want to jump in first and kind of give us a sense of what your role in your day-to-day looks like.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, I'm Annie Brock. I have had a lot of roles in the actual school setting, from English teacher, creative writing, debate coach. I was director of libraries and a technology coach, and now my role is sadly more a desk job, working on digital learning experience, designing digital learning experiences. So it's kind of boring. Heather has the much more exciting role, working with kids every day. So.
Hello, I'm Heather Hundley. I'm so excited to be here. I serve as the Director of School Improvement for a school district in Kansas. I support teachers and staff in creating those high-impact learning environments. My day-to-day really kind of centers on working with our strategic plan and our district focus on building that culture of belonging, instructional excellence, and the future preparedness. It really includes a lot of different opportunities for me to get into classrooms, working with teachers, administrators, thinking about how we can really create intentional practices in the classroom, whether that happens to be with high quality instructional materials, our walkthrough tools, utilizing professional development in the best way possible to support staff.
Well, I'm just so excited to have both of your perspectives on this topic on the podcast today. I know you have a new book, our second edition, I should say, of your book out around this idea of growth mindset and what it means to kind of set goals and have a sense of where you're going over the course of the year. So growth mindset is a big term. And before we dive into goal setting together, could you define what growth mindset means for listeners? Maybe, Heather, you can start us off.
Yeah, so this work really centers on Carol Dweck's research. Growth mindset is the belief that abilities, intelligence, and talents can be developed over time through effort and feedback and perseverance. So it's not really about telling kids just to try harder. It's really about cultivating that learning culture where challenges are really embraced and we're learning from our mistakes. If we're valuing those learning opportunities that we put in front of students, and success is really tied to the entire process, not just about the end outcome. And so when we think about growth mindset and how it applies to goals, that it absolutely fuels the goal setting practices and routines.
And I love that emphasis on culture and process, right? It's not just try harder, which is like something that is hard to wrap your head around and doesn't feel good all the time for adult learners, let alone students at different ages. So what does goal setting look like when growth mindset is really at the center of that conversation?
Definitely becomes more of a reflective practice. There's more dynamics that fall into that goal setting practice when you have the growth mindset culture that's really supporting it. So when we lead with a growth mindset, we're really helping students and teachers set goals that emphasize progress and learning over those performance and outcomes pieces. So thinking about, did you meet the goal versus what did you learn from the goal setting practice and the process? And so what's something that you would do differently next time? What is something that you might be able to replicate that worked really well for you? So thinking about scaffolding those goals with feedback that emphasizes strategies and effort. So maybe instead of saying like, I got an A or I want to get an A, I'm setting a goal as a student. I might be thinking about how can I use 3 strategies that would help me to work towards that goal of getting an A. And so that one particular assignment or task, how could I analyze that text differently? Or what could I do to revise my writing? Getting a little bit more granular and thinking about what's the process that I can really delve into.
I think we might be remiss here if we don't mention the foil to growth mindset, which is fixed mindset. Because if you are a teacher, you've absolutely heard someone say, "I'm not a math person. I'm just not creative. I'm not artistic." And what I love about goal setting is like it personalizes this growth mindset journey to wherever you are. So it may be your goal for your paper is focused on, spelling and mechanics, and maybe someone else who's a little further along in that aspect of their writing has a different goal related to symbolism or some other topic that's more downstream. So yeah, I love growth. I love thinking or connecting goal setting and growth mindset because goals are personal. Yeah. And so is growth. And we're all going at our own pace. We're all on our own journey and we're not all in the same spot. And so I think those two conversations, goal setting and growth mindset have to go hand in hand because no matter where you are, you can set a goal to get to the next best thing, right?
Yeah. And it's so easy to say like, oh, we all have the same goal or we all want to get to this same end place, but it's way more nuanced than that. And when you both mentioned, right, this emphasis on the process, on scaffolding, how we're going to get there, on reflecting on what's worked well for you as an individual to help you get to that big goal in the first place or in a past experience, I think it's really important to emphasize just how personal that is, particularly whether it's an adult learner who will tell you they're not a math person, just like a 4th grader who would say math's not for me. And you're like, why do you even, like, where did that come from? When you're 8 years old, right, that you're coming to the conversation with that already. And, as we think about an EdTech connection, what role do you think technology can play in helping kids, helping students, help adults set and track meaningful goals?
Well, I I think it is so, first of all, let me acknowledge that the amount of tech tools and the way that kids are using them, the amount of, know-how it takes to leverage these in your classrooms in a really positive way, it can feel so overwhelming. But on the same token, man, can some of these tools just like be such game changers to propel every single person, no matter what level they're at in your classroom, forward. Such a great tool for personalized learning. I think I was kind of like thinking like, what specific tools would I want to talk about in terms of like goal setting tech tools?
Yeah.
Number one I use with my own daughter, Goblin tools. I don't know if you've heard of this.
Yeah,
but
it's wild. Yeah.
You can put a goal or a task or whatever in, and we'll break it down into its component parts, because sometimes, like Heather said, our goal is just like get an A. Well, what does that mean?
Right.
What does it mean? Let's break that down into parts and pieces that you can take one bite at a time, right? We build it brick by brick. And so what are the bricks? And Goblin Tools is such a great tool for helping you figure that out. I think Heather and I are both a big fan of SMART goals, setting SMART goals. So it's specific, measurable. A lot of us are familiar. We have a whole section in the Growth Mindset Coach on SMART goals. And one thing I think would be great is to like work with an AI and have them coach you through that process. Like we developed a prompt where you can ask the AI, like, will you walk me through this process of creating a SMART goal for this, on this topic, and then have a conversation that ultimately builds into, developing your own little SMART goal. And I think the third piece is leveraging data. I think kids do not get a chance to work with their own educational data as much as they could. I think that could be such a powerful motivator. And I think there's a lot of free and accessible tools online that would give kids a chance to learn how to read data and parse data. Data analytics is a huge field. Like when we're talking adulthood, right? Like being able to understand data and read data, understand what it means is so important. So even just like setting up an individual dashboard for kids to let them compete against themselves. In the corporate world, where everyone talks about OKRs and KPIs, objectives and key results and key performance indicators. That's just data. Those are just goals. And so we can think about those big ideas that are used all over the world to keep the economy moving and keep different parts and pieces of our world going, and bring it down to the classroom and showing kids like, oh, goal setting is like a critical part of so many jobs that are available, so many ventures in the world, and helping them connect those big ideas to numbers that they're seeing, and to, how does your effort make a little difference in your numbers? So I don't know. I just think there's so many great opportunities to bring data analytics into the classroom, even at the youngest levels. You can do fun things.
Right. It doesn't have to be, although I definitely see a benefit right at a secondary level to introduce some of this vocabulary that might pop up in careers that they have. But for many students who just think of like a goal as their reading log and how many pages did I read, like that's not particularly engaging or exciting. It's hard to see like the movement there. It feels more like it's the, a penalty, right, that's being attached to it. And, the AI connection is really interesting. Goblin Tools is a fantastic one for differentiation and breaking down tasks. And I love the goal setting connection. And even just as a professional, right, if you have a goal that you're working on for, say, the second half of the school year, and you want to make sure that you aren't missing anything or you're making it manageable, right, you can go to a chatbot and say, this is what I'm working on. Help me with the SMART goal framework, right? Ask me questions to help me do this. And it will do like almost like an interview.
Yes.
And if that feels intimidating, which it might for someone who's like new or revisiting goal setting or new or revisiting chatbots, you could start off with something like, ask me questions to help me plan our spring break family trip, and it'll do it. And then you can get that like out of your system to jump into a goal setting interview. I appreciate all of those responses because I think there's so many directions you could go in here.
Yeah. And one thing that's so important for goals, obviously, is self-reflection, but it's so hard to do. And it's so hard to talk to kids about. I always tell this little anecdote about when I talk about growth mindset in speech settings. We talk about the voice in our head and meta-analysis and thinking about our thinking. I always talk about a time my son came out to me. He was 4 or 5 years old. And he's like, "Mom, I hit my sister." And I was like, "Oh, did the little voice in your head tell you to come tattle on yourself?"
Right.
And he just looked at me with the most serious face. And he's like, "How did you know about the voice in my head?" It's that's a big concept to sit and self-reflect and think about how you think. And I think that interview strategy that you're highlighting is such a good way to get people thinking about their own thinking in a really accessible way.
Yeah, I love that connection. And, as we think about putting this into action in a student-facing environment, in an adult professional learning environment, what's a favorite activity or strategy you've seen that helps students or adults, track some of this academic or even personal growth? Maybe it's using tech, maybe it's not using technology. Heather, what are some things that you've seen?
I really love just to keep it simple. I think, not using technology, really putting it down on a sticky note, keeping it in front of you. What's something that just keeps it really, really simple. And so I think that's one of the big pieces that we've talked about. Again, it's pretty easy to put it on a sticky note, identify what the goal is that you're working towards, what are some actions that you can take to it, check it off if you want to have a little rubric or a checklist, if you will. Everybody loves to cross something off of a checklist. And so that continuance, we talked a little bit about micro goals or breaking it down brick by brick. What are the things that it's going to take for you to ultimately get to that end goal? And so we know deliberate practice, continuing to work consistently towards that smaller goal over time helps you to achieve those bigger goals. And so for me, I really love just keeping it simple and putting it together. I think using AI as a thought partner and helping you to identify what that could look like is a great way just to, again, kind of bouncing off of what you already all mentioned. I think it's a great way to just continue that practice.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be just one thing or all the technology. I'm a big index card person for my note-taking strategy. I never shook that from middle school, I guess, right? So just the idea that, you can lean into a process that you might already have, and perhaps, there's a piece of technology that complements it, but it may not, right? There's moments for all these different things. So for a teacher who wants to incorporate goal setting into their classroom routines, maybe using technology, or some more offline options, especially, in January when there is that kind of fresh start. The year feels like it resets, even though it can feel a little random at the same time. What would you recommend? What's one way a teacher could incorporate goal setting into their classroom? Maybe we'll start with Heather and then Annie if you want to jump in.
I think really just modeling it. So that is a great way for teachers to be able to think about incorporating goal setting into the classroom and helping understand what that looks like by just modeling what their practice maybe has been previously, setting it up, what worked for them, what didn't work for them. I think really doing it alongside of your kids. And when you make those slip ups, when you do something that you feel like you're achieving that next thing, you've gotten some takeaways, some learning that you're able to really use to help leverage that next step in your goal. I think those are all really meaningful ways to really create that environment for students to know that you too, these are the things that you work through as an adult. Sometimes we feel like when we turn to that magical age of adultness, that things just become easier and it's just going to be, easier to be able to achieve those goals. And I think it's just keeping it real, helping kids really see that connection to what you're working on in your own journey.
And I think one of the things, this reminds me of something we mentioned in the book, which is an activity that we found a math teacher was doing called My Favorite No, where the kids come into the classroom and every day they answer a math question on a note card and she quickly sorts them into the right answer and the wrong answer. Then she goes to the wrong answers and she picks out her favorite no, which is a wrong answer that shows really good thinking. And then they talk about, and it's almost exciting for the kids' wrong answer to give. I mean, how often does that happen? But I think, Heather, is absolutely right on by just modeling the process. And like, what does it look like when you don't meet a goal? What does it look like when you fall short a little bit? And can you still see the growth in that? I remember when Growth Mindset, the first edition came out, someone contacted me and they're like, I'm sorry, it was like an email. It was the strangest thing, but it was the person said like, I'm sorry, like, I just don't buy into growth mindset. Like, I know I'm not a math person because it took me 3 times of taking college algebra before I passed it. And I was just like, say that again. And she's like, yeah, it took me 3 times. And I'm like, oh, what? And like, so you're saying like you took on a challenge that was really hard and you kept at it and you persevered and then you passed college algebra, right? So like you have to like look at the failures as part of that learning goal and part of the mistakes. But I think back to your question I'm so glad this is coming out in January because the fresh start effect is like an actual real phenomenon, right? That is such a great way to trick your brain into like, I'm starting something new. Yesterday was yesterday. Today is the future. And that can be like January. It can be a Monday. It can be your birthday. But like, if you get one of those days that feels like it can be a fresh start, it's a great way to like start pursuing a goal that day. And so just taking a moment to like create that mental separation, like that was yesterday. Number one, like lots of kids need a fresh start and a new chance. And lots of teachers need to get in the framework of like, this kid needs a fresh start right now, in my mind, in their mind, whatever. So just a great time to get mentally prepared to tackle something new. But yeah, like using that January as like your fresh start trigger, like what is going to be our goal? Who do we want to be? Who do you want to be? What do you want to do by the end of this year? And then definitely like using technology. We were talking earlier about like using reels or like leveraging like a social media concept, not necessarily on social media, but like maybe you take a 10-second clip of talking about what you did that week toward your goal. And then toward the end of the year, like putting them all together, stitching them all together. And like, you've got this growth video to show you like how your effort led to whatever it is that you ultimately achieved. And maybe it'll show like midway, you decided like, you know what, this isn't the goal for me. I want to do something different, and you pivot. And like, that's part of it too. And so, yeah, January is a great time to have that conversation and have kids and teachers set new goals, try something new.
I think that refinement piece is really important too. Like promoting that and making sure that when you get through that process or as you're moving through, pivoting or refining it, what's working, what's not working, you're just continually coming back to that continuous improvement.
Yeah. And you can capture that process, right? I often use the term like social media inspired projects. Like we're not going to post this on Instagram, but we've seen all these short videos. It's what we're using as like our exemplar, if you will, right?
Right.
And it's intimidating to say like, oh, I'm going to sit down today and talk about the past 2 months, right? And like all the little things I did. If you can have these moments that you capture throughout, right, that whole process, it's surprising almost for someone who might feel like, oh, I'm never going to get there. Like I got there and there were all these different pieces along the way. And, we've mentioned your book a few times as we've gone through, and as we, get ready to finish up here, I want to make sure we hear a little bit of the like behind the scenes, what inspired this updated edition. I've done a second edition once and it was really a fun process because you like do something different than starting from scratch. So what inspired this updated edition of the Growth Mindset Coach, and how does it support educators working in today's tech-rich classrooms?
Right. Well, this one was hard. I got to say, like, I had some reservations about doing a second edition in a lot of ways. Like the first edition of Growth Mindset Coach came out in 2016, and it just hit at the right place and the right time. And this idea of growth mindset really took off. And there's great with that because the concept is out there. People are using it. We're talking about it. We're eschewing those old ideas like, I'm not a math person. Like we're not believing that anymore. But at the same time, the ideas kind of got a little bit watered down, a little memeified, if you will. And it can get reduced to like a bulletin board posters and becomes less about the process and can even veer into this like toxic positivity area where like, and I didn't like that. And so I wanted to just, for me, and I think Heather too, like we wanted to just remind people like, okay, this is a process. Let's get back to the basics. It's not like this fluffy feel good thing. It's a real process. It's the way our human brains are actually working. It's how these concepts of like plasticity, that we can learn new things and build new connections in our brain. We have to get back to those really important basics of growth mindset and kind of away from like the memified version of growth mindset that we see. But also like it was difficult because it's really tough to be a teacher right now, especially in America. You're facing, I mean, let's be honest, like in some places, it's can be bleak with all sorts of like, political infighting and other issues. There's school board issues and parent issues and cell phone issues and AI issues. And like, and so we wanted to like bring this idea of growth mindset to this whole new cohort of teachers. There's 10 years worth of new teachers that are in our schools since our first book. And so we wanted to kind of double down on the importance of growth mindset, let them know that like bringing growth mindset to work will help us as teachers not let these challenges overwhelm us. And we can lean on what we already know and set new goals for ourselves and persevere through difficult times. We can use this stuff too. And so and that's why I think technology in particular, since we're talking about it, is it's a really important, I think we have to use our growth mindset about technology because I've heard so many teachers say like, no more cell phones in the classroom, or we're getting away from computers, or just kind of like the pendulum swinging like completely the opposite way. But I think if we kind of put on our growth mindset hats about it and like, how can we approach this in a way that embraces some failures that we may have made with kids in technology, like that's okay to do, but also to lean on what we know to build something better. And for me, like there's some really old school frameworks, the SAMR, substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition, like is what you're doing with technology in your classroom, is it really improving learning, or is it just adding extra noise for you? And if it's adding extra noise, forget it, like get back to what's really making the difference. And then even just like the Bloom's taxonomy, like let's stop using technology for technology's sake. Would a lesson be stronger and clearer? Are students being empowered to choose their own tech tools, use critical thinking? And so, it gives, we're able to incorporate, because a lot has changed in terms of technology in 2016. And so we were able to incorporate like a lot of feedback we got to make improvements. Like you said, the second edition is so fun because you can fix some past mistakes. I could remove some quotes from people whose quotes I value less now, et cetera. And I think it gives us an opportunity to like actually talk about technology in these have these frank discussions about it. Like, what's the best way to do it? How are we going to get the most value? And so we were able to incorporate some of that, some talk about AI and cell phones and things like those into this new edition, which I hope teachers find valuable.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there that you can, get back into, especially once, you've had, almost a decade worth of conversations with people, of feedback, of stories that might be a better way to illustrate a concept. So, of course, we'll link out to the book and ways to connect with you both for anyone who's listening. It'll just be in the little summary area of the podcast and on the website. But for anyone who's on the move today and is kind of, making a mental bookmark of where to circle back to connect with you both, where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about your work?
I have a writing website, AnnieMayBrock.com, AnnieMayBrock.com. And you can email me there and get links to all our we've written several books on the topic of growth mindset. And then you can also find me on LinkedIn. Just search Annie Brock and Growth Mindset Coaches in my bio.
Perfect. And I'm Heather Hundley on LinkedIn as well. So I don't have a fancy website, Annie, but find me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to connect.
Well, thank you both for your time and your insight and your recommendations for teachers today.
Thank you, Monica. We really appreciate you having us on.
Yes, thank you so much.
It was lots of fun chatting with Annie and Heather today. So let's make this EdTech easy with a few key points from today's episode. Growth mindset is a process grounded in reflection, not toxic positivity. Tech tools can scaffold goal setting and support personalization. AI tools can act as coaches to guide students and educators through SMART goals. January is the perfect time to use the fresh start effect to launch new goals. Remember, you can find the show notes and full list of resources from today's episode, including all of the ways to connect with Annie Brock and Heather Hundley by heading to easyedtechpodcast.com. This episode is sponsored by my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction, published by ASCD and ISTE. It's full of quick tips educators can use, and Amazon almost always has it on sale. Just search for me, Monica Burns, on Amazon to see all of my books and quick reference guides. But please remember that there are 2 authors named Monica Burns on Amazon, and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to tell the difference between our books. Just head to Amazon, search Monica Burns, and you'll find my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction. Thank you for listening to this new episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. I love creating new episodes for you each week, but I could use a bit of help spreading the word about the podcast. Can you leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app? Spotify will let you tap on the stars, and Apple Podcasts will let you tap on the stars and leave a 1 or 2 sentence review. Thank you so much for taking this extra step. It helps other educators find episodes like this one when they're searching for EdTech tips.